Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, Strap-N-Oil Soap Company, as well as Rolls Gear, and you can find all of our old episodes at bjjshow.com. I'm Rob, and Randy and I had another Facebook Live episode that we did together, and we are still looking for you guys to ask us questions that you want answered or anything you want to know about us. And make sure you send us messages or send us questions through either our Facebook page or on the website bjjshow.com, like I said earlier. But we kind of talked about the Olympics and cross training, and I think it came out really well with some of the conversations we had. Kind of maybe came to an agreement on whether or not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu should be in the Olympics or not. But we really hope you guys enjoy this episode, and don't forget, please send us questions. We really, really want them. We want to have a little more interaction with you guys. So, like I said, send them through the Facebook page or through bjjshow.com. One thing I am really excited about, this was almost like a down to the wire thing, was with what is it? Us getting one more gold medal than China did. We had the overall, but then right at the end we got the one more than them, so we won the Olympics overall.
Yeah, that's important. Can't let China win that.
No, not at all. But I did get to watch a lot of wrestling this time around as well, so I was happy with that. I was happy I could watch that for once, even though it was at work, but I could still watch it.
I was a little frustrated though with how difficult it was to find a definitive schedule for wrestling, because I really wanted to see Kyle Dake and his journey. I ended up missing it live, or as close to live as you can. I ended up watching some replays and some highlights of his bronze medal match. But
one of the guys at work actually wrestled where he's from, and he was like, "Yeah, it was great. He would just beat the shit out of me constantly, and there's nothing I could do about it." So, well, that's fair. That's fair.
Are we up?
Yeah, we're up. We've been up, man.
Okay. Yeah, so
did we watch Gable Stevenson? I sure did. Holy shit. Speaking of down to the wire.
Yeah. That was a gold medal match, right?
That was.
Yeah. Last second comeback.
Yeah, it was a guy from Georgia. I thought he was wrestling, I think. Georgians, those are giant dudes.
Well, I feel like the Georgia as a nation is really starting to take combat sports by storm lately.
Yeah,
I mean UFC and a little bit in kickboxing, and obviously the Olympics now. I mean they're really on the map.
Yeah, I met a few of them while I was on my business trip, and I'm like, geez, you guys are like the size of me. And it's like they're like, oh yeah, you want to come work out? I'm like, nah, dude, we're good.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even know what that region of the country is called. I'm not very good at geography, but when you look at Kyrgyzstan as well, I mean, just had Rafael Fiziev fight yesterday. He's kind of an up and comer. You've got a lot of athletes coming from that region of the world that have just been dominant.
I think honestly, it's just the ease of accessibility for the sport. So talk about judo. Judo is one of the most widely practiced sports and martial arts out there, just because you need a gi and throw people, and the rules are pretty simple. Wrestling, same thing. You don't even need a gi for that. Soccer, you just need a ball. It's just like a pretty universal sport that anybody can pick it up.
Yeah. And apparently, I guess, did I hear correctly that Sambo is being considered as a future Olympic sport?
I think we have enough grabbing and throwing sports already. Sambo used to be one, didn't it? I thought it did.
I think it used to be. I mean, I think it used to be, and I had it was a discussion board I was looking at over on Belt Checker's website, actually.
Yeah, nice.
And they were talking about, hey, would there be a lot of jiu-jitsu crossover into Sambo competition if it made it to the Olympics? I'm kind of like, well, not really, because if you look at jiu-jitsu, let's be honest, most schools are they very much neglect the takedown game. I mean, I feel like people are getting better about it.
Yeah.
But a lot of jiu-jitsu schools don't focus on takedowns as much as they would need to be effective in Sambo, which is why you don't see too much of it in judo. Travis Stevens being an obvious exception.
Yeah.
He's a black belt in both, though. So, I mean, that's a little bit different.
Yeah, but Sambo, so I just looked it up. It's never been an Olympic sport from what I read. Okay. But also at the same time, like I said, I don't know if we need a lot of more grabbing, throwing, combat sports. And, well, I mean, like, you said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know that's been kind of a topic for people who are like, hey, let's make Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu an Olympic sport. I think it's a terrible idea to do that because, personal opinion, you see what happened with judo. Like the majority of the stuff you could do in judo, you can't do in Olympic style judo because of like not really the danger, but I think more or less for like I don't know what the rule set like why they changed the rules in a way that you couldn't do it. Like you can't grab legs and take people down. You what else? Certain throws are illegal. Like I get that some of them are pretty dangerous, but at the same
Well,
time,
and
like oh,
the
go ahead.
Newaza, the Newaza is limited as well, right? Their ground fighting is limited significantly unless you're actively working for something. They stand them up super quick. Which my understanding of anybody out there, judo experts, my understanding of that is that historically that wasn't always the case, that you had a little bit more time to work on the ground because Newaza is a significant part of judo. It's almost like the reverse of the problem with jujitsu these days. Is we spend 95% of our time on the ground, 5% on our feet, when it should be a little more balanced, probably, if we're honest.
Yeah, but I also think as much as I love Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, it's boring if you don't know what's going on.
You don't know what's going on. It can be, yeah, yeah. But
Because I
holy
mean,
shit, so is soccer though. Come on, man.
I can understand a ball getting kicked into like if I just erase everything I know about martial arts, I can understand a ball getting kicked into a net better than I can understand like why did that guy roll through they get stood back up. Because I mean at work I'm legitimately just like talking about the rule sets for everything. And I'm
Right.
not even an expert on them. They're like, oh, well, why do they stand them up? I'm like, oh, they kind of stalemated there, or they have 20 seconds to try to submit the person, and if they don't, then they like bring them back up.
Yeah. How do you feel about? I mean, it's obviously, but you just said you're not really a big fan of the idea of jujitsu as an Olympic sport because of the effects it'll have on the art. And I've heard some conversation about Muay Thai also being considered for Olympic sports, and I think that style would be pretty bastardized as well in the Olympics because it's just so violent in its nature. Are they going to restrict elbows and knees? Because at that point it becomes kickboxing, right?
Yeah.
Are they going to restrict clinch usage, and how does that going to work? Are takedowns going to get scored? Is it going to turn into like Sancho basically, where throws are scored and points are awarded for that? Um, so are you kind of the opinion that the Olympics for combat sports is a bad idea for the most part?
I mean, I think boxing's done well in it.
Mm,
I think boxing has done well, but it's legitimately just punching people. Well, I'm saying for like lack of a better description, it's just punching people, right? We're not worried about kicks. We're not worried about elbows. We're not worried about knees. We're not worried about throws. People still get knocked out.
right.
Um, but for some reason, there's still this whole, I don't know, like worry about like, oh my God, if you kick somebody in the head, that's way more damaging than if you punch somebody in the head. So like a good example is the guy who got knocked out in the finals of karate. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Oh yeah, yeah. He got laid out. He got taken out on a stretcher.
Like it's a sport where you kick and punch people. Like I hate to be that guy, but what the fuck do you expect?
Right.
And that poor like in all fairness, that dude should have won because
Yeah.
he like ducked into the kick. If you can't kick to the head, whatever, man. But he ducked into that kick, and
Well,
that
what
should be
about
like a no fault.
well, and you saw where a couple things too. Boxing has changed in the last couple of years, so where now they're not wearing headgear in the Olympics anymore, which I honestly think
That's
is
true.
uh, not wearing headgear is. I guess it was based on the studies that the headgear doesn't really protect too much against severe concussions. It protects more against contusions and stuff of that nature, but
Yeah.
the damaging effects of the brain are still there. So why bother? And I think we're starting to see some better boxing as a result. Not as much of like a slugfest as it is good technical boxing. Um, and then also, you look at what about wrestling? I mean, wrestling is like the original Olympic sport, right? And I
Yep.
remember a few years ago they took it out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you remove the original Olympic sport, the quintessential Greco-Roman is like where it all started,
I think it was. I don't know exactly why they pulled it away, but I know like there's been a cut in funding in wrestling stateside for colleges and stuff like that. So it's not really that cool that they're getting rid of stuff like that, but it's like that. Like you said, the Olympic sports were just like fighting each other and running and like throwing shit. That was it. those were your Olympic sports, and I think it was well thought out. But of course, there's other stuff that kind of simulated combat in a way, or like things that help combat, say like fencing or was it the steeplechase or riding a horse? That's like absolutely something officers back in the day would do, is ride horses or cavalry or stuff like that.
Well,
Um,
when you get down to the nuts and bolts, aren't most sports simulated violence to some degree?
some degree, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Maybe not so much like baseball or soccer or well, rowing. I mean, rowing. I guess you can chalk that up to like,
An invasion
yeah,
of
like
Vikings coming
not
to
a,
pillage your land.
dude. Those boats weren't just like sailing on good intentions and just win. If they had to catch up, they started rowing, didn't they?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
there's
Well,
that.
then I mean, one of the least, I think one of the most underrated athletic sports in the Olympics
What's
is
that,
water polo.
dude? Yeah, we were watching that too, and somebody's like, "Oh, why don't they just stand at the bottom?" And somebody goes, "Well, because it's 12 feet deep."
Yeah,
That's fucking insane, dude.
yeah. Well, I mean, those guys beat the hell out of each other out there too, man. That's a rough sport. I mean, so I'm of the opinion when we talk about jujitsu and the Olympics, uh, I can definitely see some of the concerns on what it might do overall, because we've already seen and we discussed before we started recording about the Jocko and Hickson episode, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal, and he discussed a lot, as most of our listeners probably are aware, that Hickson discussed a lot his opinion about self-defense jiu-jitsu versus sport jiu-jitsu, and what it was originally intended for, and what has kind of happened over the past several years with jiu-jitsu and sport. um, and so that would just kind of get even more blown up or exaggerated if jiu-jitsu became an Olympic sport. But I also see it as good exposure for the art as well, so I'm kind of divided on it. Do you think that, let me ask you this, if it were to become a sport, would gi or no gi be the better approach?
Damn. Well, I mean, that's actually a pretty good. It's a pretty good question. Now I think about it, I guess maybe it goes back to accessibility of it. Like everybody's got a pair of basketball shorts and a tank top.
Yeah, but
Like I know that.
you'd have to have some kind of uniform. Like the countries would obviously give some kind of no
Yeah.
gi uniform or a gi, you know, uniform or whatever for their respective countries.
No, no, I agree with that. I'm just saying, like for practicing, like where do
Oh
you get
yeah,
your
yeah,
talent pool? Like where do they
yeah.
come from? So
That's
I
true.
mean, Brian Crandall posted last time that they've now sent out 4,000 gis to military members. I mean, and that's a labor of love from him. But I mean, like, what about other countries? Not saying him. I'm saying like other countries may have an issue like getting gis and stuff like that. But like, I think no gi might be a bit better for it.
I
But
think no gi would be more entertaining.
I think so too. If we're going off of an entertainment aspect as well, I think no gi would be more entertaining.
It would, because it would move. I think things would happen quicker, right? I mean, I know that even when you and I roll, if we roll gi, I'm going to be a little bit more methodical about when I move, how I move with the gi. I want to make sure I got my grips in place, or I remove your grips, or whatever the case may be. And those lapels and those, lapel grips and sleeve grips and pant leg grips, those things can kind of slow down the roll and kind of minimize the explosive opportunities. Whereas in no gi, I feel like it's always like, if you when you get trained no gi, you have to refine your attacks, because people can escape your attacks by just being sweaty. So you really have to make sure
Yeah.
your position, everything is locked in tight. Whereas in gi, I feel like you refine your defense a lot, because there's more ways to get tapped out and it's harder to move and find space. There's more friction with the gi. And so I think when you talk about Olympic sports, I think no gi would be more enjoyable to the eye.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I absolutely could agree with that because, like you said, like when we roll, I enjoy gi better because I don't have to deal with you being so fast, and then like trying to like I can grab stuff. I feel better
Right.
about like I just feel more comfortable in gi. Although no gi, I do get to use my natural defense, and which is just being sweaty as shit all the time and to get out of stuff. But still, like it's more like you have to be almost moving constantly to stay ahead of the other person who's also moving constantly. And I mean, it's at that point, it's a 6 minute battle of who's moving faster, who's got more muscle memory on certain submissions, takedowns, reversals, stuff like that. And I think overall, it would be a better sport to watch if it were to go to the Olympics, which still kind of hope it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, then, and then we can take it a step further. If we say no gi is the better one, uh, points or submission only.
That's another one, man. Because I was thinking about this too. Because Dean Lister came up in conversation his match with Josh Barnett and how it was like up to the last minute he submitted them. But the majority of the matches you get from like Metamoris or if they do EBI rules, like I don't want to see stuff go for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
No winner at the end. And they got to do a tiebreaker every time. Honestly, just run it like a normal tournament.
Yeah.
Double elimination, points, or submission.
I think points would be cool, but I could also see if they were to maybe modify a little bit, if they did submission only, but they awarded advantage points so that if they're, if they went to 20 minutes, like make it a 20-minute round or whatever, then after that 20-minute round, if there's no victor, then they go to advantage points to determine one. Because that kind of reminds you a little bit of, a little bit of judo and some of their rules, right? Some of the penalties
Yeah.
and stuff like that that they will assign, you can win off of penalty points. It would kind of remind me of that. But I think I agree. I think points, if you're going to do it and you're going to go no-gi, I think points, the point system would guarantee it'd be more appealing to uneducated audiences or mildly educated audiences, because
Yeah.
you and I could sit there and watch a 25-minute match between two high-level black belts and be like, recognizing the little idiosyncrasies and the minor adjustments they're making to win the big battle, right? And you're going
Yeah.
to wait for that final moment. But if you take somebody that only knows a little bit about jiu-jitsu, or you take audiences like what watch the Olympics. I don't know everything about judo. I don't know all the fine-tuned rules about judo. I don't know much about water polo or gymnastics. So, it's the obvious things that catch my eye. And if you do no-gi with points, then you're going to have guys working for sweeps. You're going to have guys working for reversals. You're going to have guys working for dominant positions and doing knee on belly to mount transitions and all these fancy things that would look cool.
Yeah.
I think that'd be cool to see. I worry though, like you, what would it do to the art long
Yeah.
term?
I think it would I think the good thing about it would be that we would get a lot more people maybe coming through the door to practice because, I think the Olympics do give it kind of like a gold seal, like a seal of approval from the world. That's like, yeah, you're an Olympic sport, and people kind of take that a little more seriously. Whereas we're no longer we still are, but we're not really seen then as the gorillas dragging our knuckles across the mats and trying just to beat the shit out of each other for an hour and a half a day.
And I think people would be really surprised at the level of athletes that exist within jiu-jitsu. I
Yeah,
think people would be really, really impressed. I mean, these guys, man, some of these guys are phenoms. It's ridiculous the shape they're in and what they're capable of and how long they can fight for. I mean, it's an exhausting art. While we're talking about that, you look at crossover and jiu-jitsu. And I mean, I feel like over the years, we've seen more and more integration of wrestling concepts in Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
yeah.
And so you have that ability as well in the Olympics to see more crossover. I mean, I think you'd probably get some freestyle wrestlers that would try their hand in jiu-jitsu competition if it was no gi.
I think so. I honestly do. I mean, it's you get judo guys as well. I'd feel
I think
like
you get more judo in gi though.
I think so, but I feel like I've always heard that you do gi to really refine your techniques, work on defense, stuff like that. But like doing no gi is kind of where everything just kind of comes together, and it's either your move well enough, like you said, to be able to hold on to it even though the person's sweaty, or it's something you have to keep working on. So I think we'd
Right.
still see some like a fair amount of judo people come over and try it out for that. But
Oh yeah.
but like you said, mainly freestyle wrestlers. I mean, I don't know if it's still kind of a thing, but for a while we had this huge influx of collegiate and freestyle wrestlers coming in to fight MMA, and they were just destroying it. Like they were just killing it.
Well, I think honestly, I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we both do. But I feel like when it comes to MMA, wrestling has become an essential foundation piece. Like you have to have wrestling to be a really good MMA fighter nowadays.
Yeah,
Wrestlers by themselves don't have the finishes, as far as submissions. But in MMA, you don't have to have a submission ability. You can dominate somebody from the top position and pound their face, and you can win the match. Having wrestling makes you extremely difficult to take down. It gives you the grit, toughness, and the conditioning that you need for the sport. And let's face it, you don't have to be in phenomenal shape to be a very effective jiu-jitsu player if you play a certain type of game. But if you take that and you throw it in MMA, well, now all of a sudden it's a little bit different. And so I think that wrestling, I don't think it's fair to say that one is better than the other. I would never say wrestling is better than jiu-jitsu or jiu-jitsu is better than wrestling, because it all depends on the avenue that you're applying it in, but wrestling now is a staple in MMA. You just cannot be an effective MMA fighter without some semblance of wrestling.
That's
But I
correct.
feel like you can be an effective MMA fighter if you have high level wrestling and striking without really having too much jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
You're gonna
because I
have
mean, I'm sorry.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead, man.
No, I was just gonna say, like, no, you're right in that aspect, because a lot of the times, like, you don't need a lot of the matches generally aren't finished by submission. Everybody wants to see people get punched in the face or, just knocked out, right? It is way easier to punch somebody in the face for like 15 seconds while you're on top of them than it is to work in a choke.
Correct.
That is absolutely the truth. Even Roy Nelson said it. He's like, "Holy shit! If I knew I could." It was something like, if I knew like it was this easy to knock people out, I'd be doing this instead of trying to do jujitsu all the time.
Right.
But I mean, he's right. It's way easier in a sense.
Yeah. And then, again, it's not to say that jiu-jitsu is useless, because I love jiu-jitsu, and I'm not saying that wrestling is far superior, but it's just, even when I say that, though, if you are a wrestler and a striker and you had zero jiu-jitsu abilities, you're probably going to be limited in how effective you can be. You're going to at least know how to you have to at least know how to defend some basic submissions and understanding of position. You're going to at least have to have that. So maybe like blue belt level, purple belt level jiu-jitsu to be higher level MMA fighter.
Yeah,
But you are going to be severely limited in how effective you can be in MMA if you have zero wrestling. I mean, that's going to be devastating for you.
yeah.
Uh,
It's
yeah.
you got to have it all. We're at the point now you have to have everything.
Yes. And I think that that's important now too for jiu-jitsu players to recognize. Even if you don't plan on fighting MMA, he's kind of getting to the point now where you got to cross train in your grappling systems. You got to get a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of judo in your system. You have to.
Yeah, and that's excuse me. That's something I've tried to emphasize with my guys when I was around my club. At least was we always start first 10 minutes is a little bit of a warm up, but we always work in a takedown. Always
Mhm.
have to work whatever takedown you feel comfortable with and get good at it, and
Yep.
then learn something else. Because if you can't get them to the ground, you guys just grab each other and fall over.
Right.
That's not a control. That's anybody's game at that point.
Correct.
You want to control the takedown. You want to control where you land on that person. You want to because that sets the pace for everything else. It's like I've joked about before. My wrestling career lasted 2 years in high school, junior and senior year. They were not stellar, but there were a couple things like you kind of learned from it. And one of them was just kind of like how demoralizing it is to get taken down, fight your way back up, just to get taken down again,
Oh yeah,
like
it's exhausting.
immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately. So if you do stuff like that in jujitsu, like if you have somebody a submission or you have somebody you're taking down and either they stop the takedown or they stop the submission and you chain right back into another one, that's something that like they teach in wrestling. I don't know if it's I'm sure some places do teach that in jiu-jitsu, but kind of that mindset came from wrestling.
Yeah, and I think it's what I'm starting to figure out too is, like I love a single leg. I feel like it's a safer option most of the time. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of games you can build off of the single leg with different types of finishes. If it's, a trapped leg, if you're outside, if it's inside, how you're going to do it. And then there's a lot of transitions from the ground if they start to, if you find yourself on the ground on your back in a position you're not particularly fond of, there's a lot of entries into a single leg where you can turn it almost into a sweep, that I like as well. So I've really started working hard on the single, and then the different offshoots from that, how to turn a single into a double,
Yeah.
uh, how to go high crotch into a single, stuff like that. And it's just like I feel like it's just like grappling on the ground. You kind of start to develop your system based around the 3 or 4 moves you really like a lot. And I don't think that there's this expectation that grapplers become D1 collegiate wrestlers, right? But if you at least have a decent understanding of the basic positions and takedowns, and you kind of develop your affinity for what your favorite techniques are and get really good at those, like the old, what was it, Bruce Lee, fear not the man who knows 10,000 kicks, but instead fear the man that practices one kick 10,000 times. kind of the
Yeah.
whole concept. Yeah.
If you get really good, and that's the thing too, I've heard people be like, oh, you need to try other stuff. You need to try other submissions. I think it's good for like the textbook knowledge. I think it's good
Yeah.
for that. But if you're killing it with certain like moves that work for you every time, like why stop? Why not
Yeah.
just get that so good? Because like you said, the man that does one kick 1,000 times and practices it and hits it every time is way more dangerous than the guy who's like, fuck, I kind of go with a Toriano pass, or I could just knee slice pass. Oh shit, I don't know what to do. Like
Yeah.
they do it, but it's not so drilled, or they haven't drilled it enough, or know it well enough that it just kind of stops them.
Well, you got to know where to go next if it fails,
Yeah,
and that's why, like, yeah, you need to know a little bit of everything as far as the positions in jiu-jitsu, but you really want to be good at a few different things. And then wasn't it Ryan Gracie that said that? No, not Ryan Gracie. Which Gracie was it that said that? Was it Health maybe that was talking about, to be really good at jiu-jitsu, you just got to know like 4 different submissions and just be really good at those 4 different things.
I almost thought it was Hoist who said that.
Was it Hoist?
It might have been. I'm gonna look it up because that's the cool part about having a computer. Is
Yeah.
I'm like the young Jamie of the podcast as well.
Just Google it. But it's so important. And then what I feel like comes off of that is you learn those 4 different moves, and you figure out what kind of areas and circle that those 4 moves that you like. And so maybe like De La Riva plays well off of it. So let me learn a little bit about De La Riva. I don't have to be a master of it, but at least know the offshoots that go back to the game that I want to push.
Yeah,
Like the Kimura obviously is central to my game, and so I've learned a lot of things that correlate with the Kimura. So
yeah, because that's always seemed to be your go to set. I can't find it, so it's
Kimura,
a Gracie said it.
yes,
Yeah,
a very respectable Gracie said it for sure. Yes,
that
yeah.
works.
But yeah, I think crossover is extremely important. I think people that are neglecting, and it comes back on this whole thing. Back when I was younger, I did Wing Chun Kung Fu, and I know you had a traditional background as well before
Yeah,
getting into MMA and Jiu-Jitsu. And one of the things about it is you get these people that are purists, and they get too hung up on, well, no, if I'm Wing Chun, I'm only Wing Chun. I can't do anything else. You're like, man, you are severely limiting yourself and what you're capable of by hamstringing yourself to that one system. And jiu-jitsu is no different. And I think one of the
yeah,
reasons why Brazilian jiu-jitsu continues to be so dangerous is because you got guys like Marcelo Garcia that have incorporated things from wrestling like arm drags into his skill set. Now arm drags are all over the place in wrestling. Everybody learns arm
yes,
drag, but that was initially a more of a wrestling move. I love arm drags. And so you've got these different offshoots that come into it. And obviously judo has a lot of crossover because jiu-jitsu essentially came from judo. So you have that as well, but so that's a little bit more obvious. But wrestling, extremely important. Sambo has crossover into Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You could argue that some striking systems have correlations into Brazilian jiu-jitsu when you look at the concepts of it. And so it's really important that we don't hamstring ourselves into what Hickson talks about in one of his articles that he just posted. He said that most black belts nowadays are learning anti-jiu-jitsu, meaning I'm only learning how to fight Brazilian jiu-jitsu at a certain
yeah.
point, right? The higher you get in this, are you learning to defeat jiu-jitsu? Are you still focusing part of your game on defeating other people and other systems and that sort of thing? So crossover, I think, kind of hinders you from being that type of person that only focuses on being better at other jiu-jitsu players.
Well, I mean, I get what he's saying with that because at the end of the day, it's still a martial art, it's still a self defense system. It's probably one of the best self defense systems, in my opinion.
Right.
But like, there's no saying that certain people can't defend themselves really, really well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I would argue to say like, say Buchecha. I'm sure Buchecha, if somebody tried to fight him, could handle
Oh,
himself and
yeah.
like beat the guy. But the other thing is, not everybody's Buchecha. No, like there's
Right.
only one of them,
Right.
and if I think as a group or as a art, if we're not focusing on being able to do everything or not be anti jujitsu, being able just to like defend ourselves. And then of course you can focus on tournament stuff as well, but don't my first go to is not pulling guard and trying to run spider guard on this dude trying to kick my ass. It's like we said, control where that person goes and then be done with it.
Well, I spent a really long time because I'm a smaller guy and because of my profession. I spent a really long time in my jiu-jitsu development working on getting on top and then attacking from on top. And I think that that's a very easy concept to kind of focus on. It's something I push towards some of the guys in my gym that are more self-defense oriented is like, look, don't get caught up in the flashy coolness of being able to test somebody out from guard. You want to get there at some point. You want to develop your guard, right? And if you're a martial artist and you want to be well-rounded, but when it comes to your mindset, when you're thinking about self-defense, I want to be on top.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm on my back in a self-defense situation, or if I'm rolling and trying to keep in mind self-defense and being realistic, then my goal for that role is to get on top before I attack. So I'm going to set up my sweeps, or people neglect this too. How about just not even so much a sweep? They get stuck like, oh, I got to sweep to get on top. It's the only way I can get on top is to sweep this guy. Well, not really.
Yeah.
Right. So you could set up a standing base and shoot the front headlock system and go into a guillotine. Right. Or you can come up, like we talked about earlier, the single leg. You can come up into a single leg and dump them on their back. I mean, it's arguably a sweep, but it depends on how much of a break there is between you getting up to that single. If they stand all the way up and then you dump them, that's more of a takedown than a sweep, right?
Yeah.
But like there's like 4 different ways that you can get on top in a jiu-jitsu match, and I feel like that is more realistic to self-defense than trying to throw up single leg X or trying to set up the berimbolo and get their back or a leg lock from bottom, which that is great to know, and it's beautiful Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I'm not shitting on it, but it's not something I would look to do if I was in a self-defense perspective, because we've seen that happen in MMA how many times in the last 2 UFCs where somebody's getting their face smashed in because they're trying to set up something fancy from the bottom, and the other guy is like, I'll just punch you in the face then.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the whole thing. Yeah,
I was gonna say, to me, the guard, even though I love playing guard, I love developing my guard. I think it's cool as shit.
Absolutely, yeah.
In the beginning, and still kind of to this day, my whole reasoning behind that is because to me, guard is an oh shit position.
Correct.
Like, I've gotten tagged, I fell, somebody tackled me, I was able to at least get guard. It's not this is how I defeat the person. I pull them into my spider guard. Like, it's okay. I can kind of reset here. What do I need to do to get out of this? And if it's sweeping them, if it's getting on top of them, if it's punch them in the face, then sweeping them, if it's standing base, it's all those things.
Well, think about why guard is a thing. Like, what makes guard guard? What's the purpose of it? And I mean, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, control the person while you're on the bottom.
Control the person, right? Control distance, control posture. Like, that's the whole thing. What makes guard better than being mounted is the fact that you still have your legs in play. You can control some of the distance. In mount, you can't. They got your hips covered. They're covering one of your control points. You can't create any space now until you get back to guard, right? Yeah. But guard doesn't always have to be closed guard. It could be butterfly. It could be all these different variations. But what makes them a guard position is the fact that your legs are in play and you're able to control distance, take it away, create it, start setting things up. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree 1,000% with you. And I think it's super important to develop your guard because you're right. It's a no shit system. And plus, not everything has to be self-defense. Like, I like to kind of taper my game. Some roles are more for self-defense. Some roles are more for sport. Some roles are more like, hey, let me go really hard with this guy because I know we can roll hard and I'm not going to get hurt because I want to test my wind and my heart and my tenacity. And the only way to do that is through hard rolls. But people kind of get it skewed though sometimes. Yeah, I think on self-defense versus sport, and how they relate to each other.
I mean, you're right. But as long as we can differentiate between the two, I think that's kind of the most important thing for jiu-jitsu. But I think the Olympics, hopefully, maybe that pulled some people in. I kind of hope it did, but we'll see.
But I think bringing it all back around, I think you're right in some of your concerns about how Olympic jiu-jitsu would affect jiu-jitsu as a whole. You'd have a lot more people that are solely focused on sport, which we already have a lot of that.
Yeah. And I will bring it back to something that you were saying that I kind of hadn't thought about before too. Is like actually making it no-gi and it being it could be more than just like your typical judo match where we're watching people try to throw each other with a very limited set of throws,
Yep.
and then kind of just stalling out. Like
Yep.
it can't. It's just I think more or less like we already have enough politics in jiu-jitsu with some certain groups like, oh my god, you went and trained at that school? You're a fucking traitor. How dare you?
Right.
Like to just even more stuff now with the IOC. But oh yeah, and that was the last thing I was going to bring up for that too. I think it might be a problem for some of the athletes because the IOC does a lot of drug testing,
Mhm.
and it doesn't
Yeah.
take a year for the results to come back.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying everybody's juicing, but I'm saying quite a few big names are.
Well, and you think about why they do it is for recovery. I mean, jiu-jitsu is such a
Yeah,
brutal sport. They got to be able to recover quicker, and so they find whatever edge they can to get more mat time because at the end of the day, it's all about mat time.
yeah.
So yeah, you have a lot of guys that would get ruled out because of that alone.
I don't know. Maybe we could, or even better, you could do a quintet. Now that I think about it, quintet style match against.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. So
I mean, I think it'd be cool to see, but I would be worried as well long term what the effects would be, what the ramifications would be of jiu-jitsu as an Olympic sport. But it would be super cool to see, though, man.
it
It'd be
would.
super cool to see. What about
So
MMA?
well, we already had pancreation in the Olympics, didn't we, a long time ago? And
Yeah,
I don't know how. Like, I think the modern pancreation rules were a lot different. But I think with what we've seen um, in MMA, like the amount of damage people can take in one match,
yeah,
and then but still win, not take it away from them, still win, and then
yeah,
they have to fight another match later on. I think
yeah.
I
That's
don't know.
true.
I think that'd be a bit like boxing's starting to get like boxing's kind of where it starts to get sketchy. I think after watching some of the dudes
Yeah.
getting rocked a couple times, but I don't know, man. That's why I'm not the big boss, man. I'm like, I don't know,
Yeah.
guys. I think maybe we should hold off on this.
Yeah.
But
I'm proud of Team USA's wrestling program, man. They
hell
kicked
yeah,
ass.
dude, they kick so much ass, dude.
Yeah.
So much ass. All right, so before we head out, anything you want to say to our friends and listeners?
Not so much. Get out there and train. Hit us up with some questions and some topics you want to hear too.
Yeah, I think we'll post that up in the group actually. Just be like, hey, give us stuff to do.
Yeah, and also
But
guests you want to see. Don't
yeah,
throw Gordon Ryan in there though, because he's not going to come on here unless we pay him a bunch of money. As much as I love that guy, I can't be realistic about your guests.
yeah, let's start working our way back up. Be like, hey, let's get some guests on here. I don't care who it is. Okay, I take it back. I do care who it is, but
You care, yeah. It can't just be yeah. If you're a white belt, you don't qualify unless you're some badass wrestler that just started doing jiu-jitsu.
yeah,
Um,
actually, that'd be interesting.
I got a guy I might be able to bring on. Pretty accomplished wrestler that trains at our gym sometimes. I think it'd be an interesting conversation because he's been doing jiu-jitsu now for like a year or so. But he's super, super high level wrestling.
Oh,
So
was I got to roll with him? I thought right. It was I'm trying
I
to
think
remember
you
his
might
name.
have I think you might have gotten a roll with him. Big guy,
Yeah,
big strong guy.
bro. There's no shame. I tapped.
Dude,
That dude
he's
got me.
legit.
Fuck. He got me in like some side headlock. So it's
Oh
like
yeah,
he was guillotining me from the side of my head. I'm like, bro, that's fucking good. I'll
well,
take
and that's
that. That
because
was amazing.
he's working with a guy that's a legit jiu-jitsu player that's teaching him kind of the front headlock guillotine series because obviously with his system that he uses from wrestling, it just correlates directly into it.
Yeah.
He was a really, really high level Greco-Roman wrestler. Like I think he was like a runner up for the US men's national team or something like that. And
Fuck.
I mean, you look at him and he's just an athletic specimen. But the guy's also extremely intelligent. He's like some kind of, what is it? The type of doctor that works with like your arms and your hands and shit.
Oh fuck. Like an
Orthopedic.
orthopedist? Yeah.
Yeah, he's like an orthopedic
Fuck.
surgeon, so he's super smart. That'd be cool to have him on because then he could talk about some of the correlations and separations between the two. And I have another idea for a guest I'll bring up to you off air, but yeah, definitely let's get some guest suggestions from our listeners, some questions and topics, stuff like that. Let's get some more interaction. That's why we're doing
So
these live episodes, so you guys can interact with us. We want to interact.
yeah, we like talking to you all. So yeah, same thing. I'm gonna post some stuff up in the Big Jiu Jitsu group, which we actually have on Facebook, and I think we still have quite a few people on there. So we're gonna bug the hell out of you. That's what we
Yeah,
do. So
yeah, yeah. Let's do it.
we will. We got some stuff brewing. Let's talk about this. Like, we'll end the show, talk a bit more about it. But I'm Rob.
I'm Randy.
We'll catch you guys next time.